Bro, I just spent 5 hours going at it with ChatGPT and Claude. Basically, I had to understand what a tokenized HELOC is, how we could, if you own property, how you could do that. How could you yourself tokenize your property that you own 100% equity stake in? How would you be able to bring this to the blockchain? How would you be able to keep track of a credit score or some type of metrics? And a whole lot more. I ain't gonna, like, stable coin issuance. So I initially said accountable. I want accountable to be a bank. And see, if I turn accountable into a bank, everybody makes money. That's the thing. Now, it's multiple ways we could really do this. And when I say everybody makes money, it's not speculation. And I can't even say everybody makes money because there is risk involved in that. And legally, I can't say that everybody will make money doing anything that involves participating into accountable first and foremost. I legally have to say these things. What I'm going over right now is a concept. This is not something that we're doing at Accountable. And I'm going over the concept because for the future of if we are even wanting to do something like this, we could revisit the concept. So, I got to get that out of the way. Okay. So, we could essentially turn ourselves into liquidity providers that earn yield for rating the value of an asset. And that asset in this case is tokenized real estate. And how do you connect that? So with Accountable, what has to happen is we need to have a digital record of this property on the blockchain. That digital record needs to be rights over the property. And in some case, it's hard to have actual value and just the representation, because what people misconfuse is, am I tokenizing the physical property? No, we're not tokenizing the physical property. We're tokenizing the rights to the physical property. So if I buy these tokens, I have the rights to this agreement that says if you purchase these tokens, this is what you get with the token purchase. Now, this purchase agreement can be for rights over access to the property. So you can buy a property token. You can buy a property token that doesn't give you property ownership. You can buy a property token that gives you property rights to access at 5 p.m. at night, like a membership. These tokens and token offerings and tokenization models, they're very vast and complex. There's a bunch of different models, and there's a bunch of different contracts that any seller on a blockchain can say, hey, this is the contract and terms if you want to purchase this tokenized asset. And give me 1 second. I got to roll my window down just a tad bit. So they say, hey, if you want to purchase this tokenized asset, we need to have representation or rights or something that allows us to say, hey, we are legally liable for this particular asset. This is our asset. This on paper is us. It's just like having a contract with a wholesaler or a real estate agent. If you sign certain paperwork and certain agreements saying that the real estate agent can sell the property, then they can sell the property. Nobody else can sell that property. This is the same concept outside of someone actually owning rights to the property, so they can say, hey, if I purchase this token, I can sell this token and rights to someone else. And in the real world, what would have to happen at the recorder of deeds office, the title would have to be still signed in real life. You would still have to do due diligence on the title research and all that stuff. That process in real world doesn't change. But now the process, it's almost a second verification layer for the real estate rights. The first verification layer for the real estate rights is the recorder of deeds office and the deed and the title to the property. That's the first verification layer. The second verification layer that allows for this asset to be tokenized and a representation of the digital documents or the documents and or other digital documents attached to this entity or to this property. That's what the token is for. I know that was super complex, but I have to say, this is what the token, when you tokenize real estate, is for. Now, I can sell this token to whoever for whatever price that I want to. So if I tokenize 100,000 shares of property, the tokens aren't worth anything yet, because I can create tokens out of thin air. So who is to say that the tokens are worth anything? What I just created when I create the token for tokenized real estate is 100,000 copies or shares of rights to this tokenized asset, paper, digital copy receipt, this agreement here. So now, how do we take this digital document and these tokens that signify ownership over this asset or this entity? How do we actually, outside of selling this asset, extract value from this? Well, this is when you have liquidity providers. So you have liquidity providers and you have a loan to value algorithm or ratio algorithm, LTV, something or some entity and body assigning a loan to value ratio. Maybe it could be a consortium of people assigning a loan to value ratio. Maybe it could be the depositors that are assigning or approving a loan to value ratio for the piece of property. So, hey, or for the rights of the property. Hey, if you have 100,000 of these tokens, that means all 100,000 tokens equals this entire percentage of rights into this property. We take those, the entire percentage, the 100% of these tokens, and now we take this to this loan to value ratio entity, and they say, okay, well, we are going to appraise this property. We believe that right now, if you want liquidity from us, we see you got the entire full unit of the property, which is the 100,000 shares or fractional pieces or tokens of this piece of property that represents the one unit. Once again, the 100,000 tokens inside of the one unit is for distribution when the token is being offered to everyone to purchase rights in this offering. Right now, this person has tokenized the property. They decided to create 100,000 shares to equal 100% of this representation. They could have issued one token that equaled 100% of this representation. And at this point of the game, that is probably the most simple thing to do. Now, let's move from 100,000 to 1 unit because it's simpler to track. This 1 unit is now being appraised. Okay, this token represents the digital deed, the title, all the stuff, the agreements of the entity, the operating agreement, blah blah blah, blah blah, boom boom boom. That's what that token represents. Cool. We will take over this rights to this. We will take over all the rights to this token, and what we will give you in exchange for the rights for this token is a loan to value ratio. Say for instance, their property was appraised at 100,000 and they want to give you 75% of this loan. So this company gives you $75,000. Now you have basically did a HELOC, or on-chain HELOC, and you have this $75,000. Boom. But where's the $75,000 coming from? That's just a number right now. It's not actually anywhere concrete, because what this LTV value entity just did was they just gave you a price that they could pay for the digital rights on a loan to you for the value of the digital rights, or the appraisal, the property, the ownership rights of this property. Boom. And now, since they've given you a value, what has to happen here is this asset has to be transferred into a vault. This vault is managed by a treasury up here. Boom. So what is happening is the tokenized asset is being put in a vault for secure purposes, and then also for control purposes. This is a record of account on the ledger outside of having a escrow, because escrow doesn't do what the single asset vault and the lending protocol does. It doesn't have the intended purpose for a HELOC, and why we would even need to do this for the HELOC, because the HELOC provides a person with equity from an asset that they own. The asset is the property. That's where the collateral comes from. The collateral is appraised, and the equity is what they've paid into this. So when you do a HELOC, what they'll do is they'll give you this loan to value ratio of what they believe, of what the equity is, or what they believe the equity, or what they believe the property is worth. Boom. So based off that LTV, they're going to, in this case, for a tokenized lending or collateralized lending protocol, it's multiple things going on here. So they're doing all of this. The person is doing this. The entities are doing all of this. So we can issue out a settlement token. That settlement token may be $1. You know what I'm saying? $1. So the Treasury, this could be a bunch of different people. Now, these people have given this loan to value ratio. Okay, where is this money coming from? The liquidity providers. Okay, hey, liquidity providers, we got a deal, this note that says, hey, this property is actually really worth $100,000. We just gave this person $75,000 for it. So if they default on the property, we get the property. We take over ownership of the property. Boom. Or the liquidity providers take ownership of that property. Or accountable could do the same thing, hypothetically. So what the liquidity providers do is say, okay, well, what is the agreement? What are the terms to this loan? You know, because if I provide liquidity, I'm lending out money. I need to know what I'll be paid for and how long am I going to lend out this money. So what the loan to value entity, or what the DAO comes up with, is the payment agreement, or even an algorithm, something that creates mortgages itself, or even the lenders and the potential homeowner can negotiate. And really, this would be really cool for sell by owner negotiation tactics on the refinance. So we got liquidity providers, and now the deal has to be structured just like any other deal, because essentially at this point the person owns the property free and clear. So they're they're basically refinancing. They're collateralizing. They're refinancing in a specific way, because they're not doing it with unsecured credit. They're doing it with collateral. And that's a totally different type of way to fund this loan agreement. So man, this is crazy. It's literally crazy. So now that they have this asset in this vault, and now that the Treasury has assigned a value that they believe they should pay for this asset inside of this vault, because the vault says, hey, here is the collateral, and this collateral is not going anywhere, because you can set the vault up like that. This collateral isn't going anywhere. Boom, because if you set up the deposit correctly, you can make sure that this asset doesn't go anywhere. Especially also if you set up the issuance of the asset as well, and if you set up the credentials and the permission domain and the permission DEX. If you set up this entire flow, there's no way that that asset can get outside of this vault or your ecosystem as someone building a safe, secure platform that allows for creditors and liquidity providers to provide liquidity and be safe at the same time, and have the same guardrails and safe rails that they need in order to prevent people running off, bank runs, and all of this type of stuff. So back to that example. Now you have this asset in this vault. Liquidity providers have been hit up, and they say, hey man, you know, hey, we got this $100,000 asset. I need y'all to pay 75. I need y'all to pay me 75K. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this 73,000, because this is how this really works. I'm going to give this, because there's bank fees involved in this, 73,000 right here to the owner. And what they're going to do is they're going to pay you back on this loan. They'll pay the liquidity providers back on this loan. And what happens in this scenario is that the owner is paying back the liquidity providers or the lending protocol or the entity that set all this back stuff up behind the scenes. And metrics are being formed. Okay, so this person is paying on time. This person is paying late. This person is, you know, overpaying. And these metrics are used to now give you an on-chain credit score, because there is really no on-chain tracking or credit monitoring mechanisms that track on-chain lending from people, because there isn't even anything to bring it back to a certain person. Now, in this situation, I didn't even account for the KYC verification part of this, because this is not a person-based blockchain. Blockchain isn't personal based. So at the KYC level, you would have to add that on as separate a security architecture like zero knowledge proof, and you would have to even architect that to be a safeguard inside of this. But since blockchain is an account-based system, any account can interact with this thing. So, and I hope I said that right, because I kind of almost forgot my point. But now what you have created is the tokenized asset, the representation of the ownership rights on chain. You brought those representation of the ownership rights to an entity that is going to give or evaluate that ownership rights. Then what they'll do is they'll assign a value to that. Then a treasury comes into place and says, hey, we'll issue out tokens to you for this valuation. It's two ways this can happen. You can issue out tokens for the valuation, like my company could go and say, hey, I'm going to issue out JUSD, and we're going to give this client that came to us JUSD, because with JUSD, it's worth $1 first. Our treasury is over collateralized, so we already have a mechanism inside of the treasury. If the peg slips, the over collateralization engine is going to rebalance the peg at all times. Secondly, if you have JUSD, you are a part of a vendor network that gives you a discount and all the vendors that accept this at their register. That's one way you can do this, because now JUSD, now the Treasury has a unique purpose and utility to even launching a settlement token. And it's a difference between a settlement token and a stable coin, because a settlement token is used to settle payments, settle things. And this is what you want in this scenario to be before it's a stable token, a stable coin, because you can turn a settlement coin into a stable coin later down the line. But what is the most important thing with blockchain, especially in lending protocols, is settlement. How fast can we settle this payment? How final is this payment? Who got money? How fast can it be provided to me? Where is it at? And that's why the XRP Ledger is the best technology for this, because of the liquidity engine, the pathfinding, the routing, and all that type of stuff, the built index, the native protocols, the native amendments that have been, granted on the blockchain. This is why the XRP Ledger is literally the best blockchain ever. You can't compare this thing, because you can't do this anywhere else. You can't do this anywhere else with the level of ease. And I know this is very complex of what I'm explaining, but at an architectural level, this level of ease and the security, how secure it is, because at a native level, we're using native protocols instead of having to build smart contracts. And that's the crazy part about this. It's free to use this. If I make a smart contract, I have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just doing audits on this freaking smart contract. And then I open up another attack vector for MEV pools, all these type of attacks. On the XRP Ledger, that can't happen. You can't have a liquidity pool. You can't have this thing get drained. You can't have these things happen like that. This is why the XRP Ledger, I got to keep saying it. But to go back to the lending protocol and how all of this works to not only give a user a credit, some type of credit score, on-chain credit score, it also pays the liquidity providers. It also opens up a revenue engine for a settlement token issuer. And down the line, it opens up an opportunity also for liquidity providers to provide collateral into the Treasury for more stable token issuance. So you got the people you got the real estate that you are using to collateralize the issuance of the settlement token. And then you also have actual real people investing into this with real money, like actual real redeemable. This part is the redeemable part, because they're giving you a class tier assets like a RLUSD, like a tokenized gold from a trusted vendor, like a USDC, really A tier digital assets, stuff that we know is going to be here. I don't know about USDC for too much longer. That's a business that needs to be sold to somebody. Ripple already offered, but you know what I'm saying, they need to sell. They're not making no money. That's the crazy part. They're losing money. They're losing money in the game of making money, and you can't do that and be sustainable. So back to this asset vault that is an issuance thing in the same thing, man. And I know this video is long, but now you have the asset, the Treasury, the liquidity providers. This person has the issued currency. You could either directly have the liquidity providers in the lending protocol pay the person that's getting the loan, because it's technically how that kind of works, or you can set the architecture up for your company to receive the money from the liquidity providers, use that money. Now, we could put it in an escrow so the money doesn't go anywhere that it doesn't need to go to. This is a part of having a trustworthy company. then you can use that to issue. Well, you don't want to put it in the escrow, but you could put it in the escrow, because you could use the escrow and other features to burn programmatically when the person makes a monthly payment on this loan. So that's the other part in the issuance of the settlement token. Even though the settlement token is worth $1, this JUSD, it's still backed by collateral, which is property. And then what's also feeding into the treasury of this are different fees. That's how we're keeping this peg going. That's how we're turning a settlement token that can really eat up settlements. It can settle $500,000 transactions in 5 seconds. Boom, it goes from point A to point B in 5 seconds. It can settle a $10 million transaction if they want to use it as a neutral asset for whatever reason. Because, hey, what if you want to spend $10 million inside of this ecosystem to get this 5% that you're entitled to when you hold this settlement token? So that is something that could be a use. It could be a use. It could be a use. It could be used. A lot of stuff that you could attach to this, people have to adopt it. So it's not a use until adoption occurs. You can have all these different use cases, but it's not useful until people actually adopt it and use it. So once again, to explain this from point A to point B, person tokenizes rights to a property. They bring this tokenized rights from a digital registry or something like that to this vault, or not before the vault, to this loan to value protocol or algorithm that assigns a value of what they believe or what they can pay for this property and the collateral and the equity in this property. Because that's essentially what the HELOC is for. A bank is paying you pennies on the dollar for equity that you have in your property. And I'm kind of not explaining it right, because the equity is 100% ownership, or whatever percentage of ownership that you have in the property. And I believe the home equity, the HELOC, only works if you own the property free and clear. So yeah, that's the only way that'll work. I may not be 100% correct on that, because you would have to if you got a mortgage, you have to refinance. If you don't have a mortgage, and you own a property, that means you own. No mortgage means you own a property. You have to do a HELOC on that, or you have to do a DSCR loan on that property if you want to get some type of capital about that thing. You know what I'm saying? Construction loan or something like that. But we're talking about collateralized lending protocols. That's the entire thing. And that's why it has to be this way. You got to own the property. You got to get the rights to the property tokenized on the blockchain. You got to go to an entity or some type of algorithm or something that says, hey, we can pay you 64% on the value of what the rights to this property are appraised for. So if it's $100,000, you getting $64,000. That then, if the person can agree to those terms, that then now goes to the liquidity provider, and the terms was just the 64K. Now the contractual part, the hard part hasn't been agreed to. How many years? What is the interest rate? Now this is when the mortgage, essentially this note, is built at this part, because we got the liquidity providers. Okay, this person is willing to pay this liquidity providers 8 to 15% in a deal. Some people, it could be better deals than that. You could have a 25%. Say they want to pay 8%, and they'll pay back this money in 10 years. So if you loaned them out, if you loaned them out $64,000 over 10 years, and you divided that by 12, so 64 divided by 12, you got 60 divided by 12 is 5 years. So you got, what is it? 64 divided by 12. Why did I get 64? I got 64 from dividing 64,000 into divided by 10 for some reason. So I need to divide 64,000 divided by 12. So 64,000. Okay, no. I broke down from 64,000. I broke down how many months it is in a year. So, okay, if we get a 10-year mortgage and they loan us $64,000, off the bat I'm paying $6,400 a year off the bat. So at $6,400 a year, 12 months, okay, how do we figure out the monthly note with no interest right now? 6,400 divided by 12. We could go to 6,000 divided by 12. It's going to be $500. Okay, so we said 6,400 divided by 12 was 40 divided by 12, and that's going to be like 36 something. So 540 bucks a month at 0% interest. I have to pay back if the liquidity providers give me this loan. They say, hey, we'll give you $64,000 for the rights of this property. Boom. Now we have to pay back interest because they have to make money for providing this liquidity for this loan. So they can say, hey, we agreed to this is the terms, 10 years, $64,000, 8% interest. So on $6,400 a year, if I'm paying 8% interest, that's almost $600 a year on that 6,400 bucks. Really good numbers, not bad. So on that 6,400, what happens is the person that gets the HELOC, the $64,000, now is obligated to pay back this loan. And now when they pay back the loan, the money is distributed to the people in the vault, aka the people that have the rights to the property or to the vault. And technically, I think I said something wrong in this, because you don't want to give the liquidity providers the rights to the vault, because what they're doing, technically, you give them the rights to the yield in the vault or from the lending protocol, because you don't want to give people the asset. Accountable is the custodian at this point, or this vault could potentially, it doesn't have to be a entity, because this is all programmable. The asset vault is now the point where they say, hey, this is collateral here, and this collateral is not being programmed to be pulled out of here. And boom, okay, now from that, the liquidity providers say, okay, we will provide the money for the lending protocol, but we need to be insured. And this is how this works. Okay, I keep messing this up. The lending protocol is paying back the people that are providing liquidity. The asset is just to hold the vault is just to hold the asset. So excuse me for that. Boom. That's how that works. That's how that works. So that's the two ways that can work. And I know that was very, very, very probably like, what the freak? But some people that can understand that, they will. And this is like my first day getting this concept out after like 6 hours of thinking about this. I've had this idea before, but I didn't know how to put it together. And it kind of just all came back after I actually read XRP 65 and XRP 66. Like, today was my first day actually reading it halfway through. Halfway through. But I drilled myself with ChatGPT and what is it? Claude, to understand and learn every question that I need to ask about it. And I'm gonna go back to the drawing board as well. But essentially, the whole entire purpose of this is to create collateralized lending protocol that issues a settlement token. I'm sorry that it took me so freaking long to explain that, but there is a process in this, and I was also thinking of things in the middle of this that may be an issue about this. So I guess we can go over it one more time before we leave. How do we create this protocol to do this? You need someone that owns the asset outright. That asset needs to be tokenized on the blockchain. Those rights need to be evaluated, and those rights need to be evaluated and given a price. Liquidity providers need to provide liquidity of what those rights are worth, and they need to be entitled to the yield for providing liquidity from the person that is taking out the loan, which is the person that has tokenized the real estate and bring it to the platform. Now, what is happening here is a contract is being agreed upon with the homeowner, and the entity that responds or negotiates the contract, because this entity could be totally different from the people providing liquidity, because people can provide liquidity, but the entity that negotiates the contract is the one actually transferring the money into the seller's account. So it's all about how you structure that part. Now, at this point, you could have the seller or the Treasury that has control over the vault, actual admin control over the vault. And now you have the liquidity providers that have ownership rights over an asset, or potentially rights to the lending protocol's yield. Goodness gracious, bro, this is difficult for me. This is super difficult for me. And I'm not gonna lie, this is difficult for one. Like, I didn't have to do this by myself. Now, and I'm very close to building this together, and I may be freaking 100% wrong. Now, the contract is formed. The person has agreed. The liquidity providers have the money ready. The money is sent to whatever entity it needs to be sent to. Now that money is sent to the person. The person is responsible for paying back into the lending protocol, which would be as simple. They wouldn't even know that this would be really necessarily happening. It would be just like any other payment out of your bank account. You know what I'm saying? And now what's happening, either when the liquidity providers are providing liquidity, the seller has options on what type of currency they want to select. Do they want to select a currency like RLUSD? Do they want to, in this case, we created another settlement token called JUSD, and do they want JUSD because of the benefits that JUSD has and all of the other merchants that accept JUSD? This is when you can, if people like JUSD and JUSD is actually accepted, and JUSD could keep its peg for $1, for every $1.43 deposited, a dollar is issued to people, and it can keep that collateralization peg right there and strengthen it and over collateralize that. Then the JUSD can be used as a settlement token and potentially a stable token as well. And that then can be used, settlement tokens are used at merchant processors like point of sale systems. And this is how you can have this flywheel with this lending protocol, with tokenized real estate, with decentralized, almost in a way, really, this could be all decentralized. There doesn't have to be really controlling entities, because this is all programmatic. But it works even better when it's actually people, real entities involved in this, because now somebody can be held accountable. Even the way that the lending protocol is set up for the pool of assets, it still holds people accountable. But what you need is agreements, and agreements is the thing that makes this work for the business. Without the contracts that hold the entities to a certain behavior, then it means nothing. And that's where the big business is. Now, to understand how to architect this on a protocol level, that's freaking difficult as heck. What I just did is super difficult as heck, and I know that I may be incorrect somewhere in this process. But without the contractual agreements saying, hey man, if you issue this JUSD, hey, I'm going to use this with my merchants. I'm going to use this. If there is no agreements like, hey, if I provide liquidity for your lending protocol, I get the rights to the lending protocol's yield that it produces. Those agreements have to be concrete and upholdable in court in the real world. And once that is achieved by anyone who can just build and do what I explained on the XRP Ledger, congratulations, you did it. So that is kind of what I kind of figured out. Hopefully I'm not super loud and arrogant and wrong, but essentially I just figured out how to, and I've never done this before. I didn't really study other collateralized lending protocols. I'm kind of just thinking about this stuff. So I didn't do no research on MakerDAO. I know of them, Curve and all that type of stuff. I know of them, but I don't know their white paper. I just know there's a decentralized lending protocol that they have their own stable token, and somehow they got depicted as well. But that is the core primitive of how to not only create a vault that a treasury can secure collateral in to use as rights to issue stable tokens or settlement tokens to use to fund the note or the mortgage that is created with the owner bringing the asset to the vault. And those tokens are now being able to be used in different merchants around the globe and around our ecosystem for accepting this type of currency. And then that currency having benefits outside of, this JUSD having benefits outside of being able to settle payments quickly, or, it being over collateralized. So if I spend $1, it's actually $1. I get 5% off at these vendors and things of that nature. And then not only that, there's a balancing mechanism in this as well. There's a class selection of, hey, what tier of assets do I want to receive as someone that's bringing my property to your platform to get an on-chain HELOC. And when you simplify all of this, because my stuff was very complicated, once you simplify all of this, it's just you're telling the user, hey, you're getting a HELOC. We're doing all the complicated shit behind the scenes, excuse my language, that's what the technology is for. That's what the code is for. The complicated stuff behind the scenes. What you want the user to see is, hey, you got a property. I bet we're going to figure out if the due diligence on the property. We'll do everything else. We'll tokenize it. We'll collateralize it. We'll do the entire process in your account. And in less than 72 hours after all of these checks have been done and verified, this is you, KYC, property token, all that type of stuff, here is your money in your account, just like how any other HELOC in a traditional financial institution would work. But the thing is, you can do this on chain from your house with code, and all it requires is liquidity providers from around the globe. Freaking crazy, bro. Blockchain is crazy. There's nothing like this technology. I keep telling people this stuff, and they don't understand it because they see scam. No, this is how the new financial products and systems are going to be ran and architected. I literally just showed you all how to build a collateralized lending protocol that doesn't involve any banks. It involves the participation of liquidity providers. What is a liquidity provider? Someone who has an asset to provide into this pool that can be used to lend value to someone else. So, bro, that's it. I guess that's it right there. And, man, this is honestly crazy. This is Fiction Crypto, everybody. Peace.